Good evening, everybody. So tonight we've got something interesting. We're on the topic of digging gold, and so what I thought we'd talk about is a little bit about that hole you're digging, and something you might or might not be aware of with what you should do about holes that you're digging. Specifically, sample holes for gold. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time kind of going over this, and it's a real quick demonstration, kind of a, not demo, but a chalk talk on exactly what it is you want to be looking for when you dig. Kind of the approach to a big hole. Small holes, yeah, they're pretty easy to do. You just get out a shovel or a trowel and start digging. But when the hole gets bigger, watch out. Or better yet, it's probably easier another way. It fits with what I just talked about in the previous video, having to do with gravity and what it does to gold when you're trying to stick your shovel down in a hole. So I'll talk about that a bit. Okay, so here's the deal. We're going to go over to the whiteboard and I'm going to start drawing. Okay, drawing. So here we go. So here's the idea. You're looking for gold, and again, X marks a spot. So somewhere down in here, I probably ought to call it G marks a spot, gold, okay? And the idea is that somewhere down under the ground, there's material on the surface here. And then there's other materials down below that at another level. Kind of like this level. And then maybe there might be another level entirely that's down here. Okay, somewhere around where the gold is. And we'll call this bedrock. Now, this won't be so much an expose about what to do with bedrock as it is about what you do heading down that direction in general. Okay, so here's the deal. When you're digging gold, common practice is, well, you just start digging away. And the answer is, well, no, you should just take a moment and think about what it is you're trying to do. Now, if you know the area and you know some things about this bedrock here, that it's angled at a certain angle, then you know a little bit more about, if it's going down at this angle, I go out this far, it's this deep. Little bit of trigonometry there. It's not terribly difficult, but the gist of it is you can eyeball the angle and estimate with your eyeball kind of, if it's going down this many feet for this many feet out, then I go out this far and I'm going to go down this deep. So that tells you a little bit about how far out we're going to see the gold. So in this case, if it were kind of angled down this way, I might want to go down to this point down here from the surface. Now, the intervening material is a bit of a pain in the rear. Okay, the intervening material is rocks and cobbles and boulders. Oh my. And so what happens here is there might be a clay kind of material down deeper. And so it represents something. Now I may or may not know about that clay layer until I hit it. Typically I don't. Unless I do seismic methods, a whole nother story, a whole nother campaign. Okay, so what we're looking at here is simply when I start digging, what's going on. So I'm going to show you a little trick. I have a thing I'll show here on the screen. Hop over to the other screen here, picture in picture. Keep working on our whiteboard project here. So again, we have our layers. And these are sort of aimed at distinguishing the work we have ahead. Now what happens here is, as you start to dig, you're going to kind of do something like this. And there'll be a tendency in digging to want to go, for the gold. Let's say we got our detector out and we said the gold's here, okay? Right there. So our detector found it, and it's happy, and we got our box here and all that stuff, and it says the gold starts right here, so start digging here. Dig here. Now, here's the deal about that. So I start digging. Now I'm going to want to dig, as they say, dig to China. You're going to want to dig as deep as you can and keep digging. But if you recall from last time's episode, there's a problem at a certain level, and it usually isn't very deep, where I can't get my shovel in anymore. That's one problem, because everything I dig up falls off the shovel before I get it out of the hole. That's not going to work. So what I've got to start doing is building an inverted layer cake. Widening the hole. Okay, so I might dig down this far, and then at this point I can't really get the material out effectively. That's okay if it's a shallow sample hole. That'll work out okay. There's another factor in here I'll bring up in a minute about safety, but let's just focus on the practicality of pulling the material out and making sure the gold doesn't drop off like we were talking about. Because the gold will tend to want to go down with gravity if that shovel's angle is too steep. It'll just fall off. So will the rocks. And you'll just be going up and down, pulling out 1 or 2 rocks at a time, or reaching your arm down in there and pulling them out by hand. There's a better way, okay? And that is, what you should do at that point is widen the hole, okay? So now I've widened the hole. I'm still digging a relatively narrow conduit down deeper, but now I can go down this far. Okay, and then what I have to do is expand the widened hole out a bit, and then what happens is I expand this down a little bit further, and I have to widen the top again because I can't quite get down in there, and pretty soon this whole thing starts looking like an expanded layer cake. See what's happening? I'm making a shaft. It's really not a shaft, it's more of a cone. Okay. That brings up the safety issue. If you ever find yourself digging and you're basically, at your waistline or higher with the hole, all it takes is for whatever material that thing's made out of to shift and pin you, and you're stuck. If you don't have a friend, you can't get out. You can scream like crazy, but if you're far enough away and down away from where the people are, that's where you typically want to be prospecting, you're going to have a little bit of a problem with, getting out. And so what ends up happening when we're all done here is we end up with a hole that has a built-in safety net, if you will, and it looks like an inverted layer cake. That's tonight's premise, okay? The layer cake effect. Now, you do this same thing when you're dredging. Same thing when you're digging down in deep material with a machine. You've got to widen the hole out to keep your safety margins up, but also to allow you to pull out the material. If you don't, trying to pull the stuff straight up, there is one way to do it, and that is make the hole wide enough to get yourself down in the hole and then fill the bucket. That's how a lot of mine shafts work. The problem becomes if you want to go horizontal, you're now digging adits and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole nother can of worms too, different safety issues. But basically what we've done here is simply create a wider hole. Yep, we moved a lot more material, but you know what? At each level, we're able to use the shovel correctly, and or any other device we have, like a backhoe, or a dredge, you name it. So this is the idea for tonight. Basically, my hole looks like this when I'm done. Remember, I removed all this material here. And yes, I've created a bigger hole than I wanted to initially, but I've also been able to go down much, much deeper. So we start doing the same cycle again, opening up each one of these pathways and getting deeper and deeper as we go. You don't necessarily have to go out as wide. Let's see. But you can kind of get the idea how this all fits to get toward where we want to go down here. This thing's going to kind of angle down here. Typically, the angle of steepness here, 45 degrees, is 100% slope grade, right? And that's kind of getting steep. Depending upon the content, if there's a lot of gravel involved or sands, you want to go a little wider than that. And the reason is safety. The sucker will collapse inward, little slide, and pin you in there, or pin your equipment in there, or any number of things. As seen on TV, if you recall the waterfall in the last episode. Man, talk about pushing your luck. All you need to do is make sure, in that episode, make sure that over here is a stream running right next to your hole, right? You know what's going to happen there. A little bit of water is going to start perking in, as it did. And then that starts causing a little bit of tendency for this whole thing to slump in with some machinery movement or people movement, and a different problem. But that's basically the idea tonight, is the inverted slope of this hole giving rise to being able to dig a deeper hole. It's still following the original, the original target was here, but we had to go deeper. And the only way you can really go deeper is to go wider at the same time. That's why, as seen on TV, as seen on YouTube, you'll see a lot of nugget hunters who are going for the big ones. They're going to start with this penetration, looking to see if they get close right off the bat, listening carefully to see if the pinpointer's triggering or not. And then they got to go wide. They got to start widening out that hole. And that's kind of the gist of it. Oh yeah, we got all the surface material's been removed as well. So that's kind of where we're going, and eventually this thing's going to go kind of down to our target. Now what happens as we start penetrating deeper is we can use a detector at this point to kind of help keep on target, and also to kind of get a better idea, is it louder than it was when we were up here at the surface? Is it growing? And by the way, that's usually when the woohoos start happening and adrenaline flows and everything else. But that's a whole nother story. So that's it for tonight. Take care, guys. Thought you'd be interested in a little bit of a tip number 2 here with how to dig layer cake, inverted layer cake. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me. I hope these are helpful for you, and I hope I can help you find more gold, because that's what we're here to do. Good prospecting and good night. Take care.